Greetings and welcome friends, I'm Ash, and today I would like to talk to you about Lost Skies, which, much like its predecessor Worlds Adrift, is all about fulfilling that primal urge of thrusting yourself into the unknown in search of riches, long-lost civilizations, and, most importantly, a chance to shoot a cannonball straight into the face of a would-be god. While Lost Skies already shows a lot of promise in this regard, the unfortunate truth is that it has cut so many corners in order to launch into early access that it now resembles a well-polished sphere. Without a shred of exaggeration, I don't think I've had a single 10-minute chunk of gameplay where I didn't encounter at least one major annoyance. And at the time of writing this, I've been playing for 28 hours. Saying this genuinely does hurt me because when Lost Skies behaves itself and when you get to sail across the skies in a ship of your own design, it is incredibly compelling. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have been playing it non-stop for the past few days after all. But when my character randomly glitches through my ship and becomes a Lovecraftian monstrosity, twisting and contorting itself in the cold vacuum of space, all I can really do is just sigh. I'll talk more about these problems as we go, but for now, let's answer what is Lost Skies at its core. To put it simply, Lost Skies is all about plundering a variety of shattered floating islands for new ingredients and recipes, using said thingamabobs to build all sorts of fancy gear for yourself and your ship, and then venturing into even more hostile areas to get even better stuff. It's a fairly simple gameplay loop, and one I've seen 1,000 times before, but it does work really well. There is something innately satisfying about taking a skyship that's just a pile of wood and rusted metal and slowly, bit by bit, transforming it into a mighty warship. And since you can control every single part of the process, both in terms of building the actual ship and choosing what sort of equipment goes into it, it is kind of hard not to get emotionally invested in it. This, I must admit, caught me totally by surprise because I usually go for form over function. This is where I gesture wildly at my Factorio review and its menagerie of flying bricks. Yet in Lost Skies, I actually took the time and effort to make my Stingray look at least slightly presentable. I am sadly still terrible at design, so it does kinda look wonky, but it is the thought that counts. Each ship consists of multiple sails that help propel the ship or maneuver in certain directions, as well as engines that give it some much needed power. It is an interesting system to mess around with since the position and angle of each element actually matters. Placing the sails backwards or the engines at a wrong angle will end up being worse for you than if you just try to paddle your way through the sky. You can freely move things around while in the shipyard, so mistakes aren't really that hard to fix. But even so, I did like having to put at least a little bit of thought into my ship's design, as it made the whole thing feel like my ship. The act of flying the ship around is also quite fun, and really gives off the feeling that you're piloting something massive. Mechanically, however, it is a fairly simple affair. You can turn left and right, go up and down, and shift your nose in any direction. As far as the controls go, that's pretty much it. But since the ship is so big and bulky, your commands will take a little bit of time to show any real effect. Because of this, you'll need to react to things before they're right in your face, and figuring out when and how to do this is going to be what separates those decorating hillsides with their ship parts and those deftly squeezing in between floating archipelagos. It is a fun skill to learn. While I am quite happy with how the ships work, even in this very first version, they do have one little issue that came to bother me a lot more than I ever thought it would. Once you start the ship and move forward, your engines will instantly kick in and you'll be good to go. However, the sails will not. So if you're like me and you have your sails spread across the entirety of your ship, every single time you go anywhere, you'll have to manually raise every single one of them. And you know what's funny? When you go to a full stop, the sails will close automatically. So why in the world do I have to squeeze myself in between all of my crafting tables in order to raise them one by one while risking death at every single step, when the helm already has the ability to control them? Just please, let me fly around and forget all of the needless busywork. It doesn't matter. Once your airship reaches one of the numerous floating islands, it's going to be time for what is probably my favorite thing in gaming, and that is exploration. Each island is seemingly handcrafted and offers some kind of mixture of puzzles, combat, and parkour gauntlets spread across a wide variety of scenery. Sometimes you'll be rummaging through the ruins of an ancient civilization, and other times you'll be hopping across rocks floating above an endless expanse of nothing. My favorites are the islands that look perfectly normal from the outset, yet contain a myriad of secrets reserved exclusively for those that sense that something is a bit off and decide to do a bit of hardcore snooping. Just as an example, there is one island with a cool-looking industrial machine at its shattered center. You'll find a couple of pieces of loot here and there, and if you're not observant, that will be it. But if you do sniff around, you'll find that not only does the decrepit house contain numerous hidden passages full of loot, but also switches that will eventually open a path to a massive underground alien ruin that leads to some kind of a command center. When I reached the end of that dungeon, I was genuinely ecstatic. All I wanted to do was learn more about this whole facility. Who built it? Why? And why did they need to hide it so well? Well, as luck would have it, I eventually found a chunky data log lying on some kind of a terminal. Excited, I clicked on it as quickly as I could, only to then remember that for the past 20 hours, every single data log, and I really do mean every single one, has been broken. The best bit? Not only did clicking on this super duper hidden data log reveal zero information to me, but it also killed nearly all sound in my game from that point onward. I could occasionally still hear gunfire, the background music, and the endless squealing of enemies, but that was it. Everything else would just kinda randomly fade in and out, and so I was forced to spend my last few hours with the game in some kind of a sensory purgatory, I guess as punishment for my trespass. I mean, just listen to this. And that is pretty much the story of Lost Skies. It's a bunch of great ideas marred by endless technical problems. How can you truly enjoy exploration when it is impossible to tell if you're just being dumb and unable to figure out a complicated puzzle, or if the whole thing is just broken and you're wasting your time? Are you willing to spend 30 minutes to find out? If you're right, it could be an amazing underground complex like the one I discovered, or it could be a switch that's buried into a rock and is thus inaccessible. Another, albeit smaller, set of issues I had with the exploration was the enemy variety and balance. Outside of special circumstances, all you'll ever be fighting is flying manta rays, drones, and turrets. As you go visit more dangerous islands, they'll become stronger and shift in color a little bit, but they'll still be the essentially same enemies you've been fighting from minute zero. The scaling is also a bit messed up since the enemies go up in damage way faster than you do, so it is very easy to end up in a situation where it takes you 10 plus bullets from a Magnum style weapon to kill an enemy while they kill you in 1 or 2 hits. While annoying, these types of issues I am far more lenient on because it is just normal early access stuff. The balance can be tweaked easily enough, as at the end of the day it's just numbers, and adding new enemies and locations as time goes on will give the game some much needed variety. The seemingly endless bugs, however, I have no idea how the developers will be able to fix in any reasonable time frame. But I do hope they manage to pull off some miracles here, as the gameplay itself is great when it works. Nowhere does this apply more than with the movement mechanics. In order to complement its exploration of highly complex environments, Lost Skies gives players access to a character that is able to climb damn near anything without ever getting tired, a glider so you can laugh in the face of gravity, as well as a personal favorite of mine, a grappling hook. And mind you, this is not your boring, you can only grapple to predetermined spots kind of grappling hook. Oh no, instead it is a physics-based grappling hook that gives you the freedom to swing around like Spider-Man, the ability to scale insanely tall cliffs in seconds, and a solid chance to earn some permanent brain damage by slamming face first into a wall at Mach 10 because you misjudged a swing. Once you wrap your head around about how your character moves, even simply navigating the environment becomes an entertaining little minigame. And that is high praise, because if the basic act of navigating the game world is a fun activity, then the game has some solid, well, floating, rock-solid foundations. The only problem I really have with the movement is the fact that your character is perhaps a bit too sticky when moving near cliffs. Perhaps because the developers were worried players would yeet themselves off into the void by being careless. Personally, I would like the option to turn this auto grab off so that I can swing with impunity and build up ridiculous speeds, even if this does mean I might occasionally splatter myself against the wall or launch myself into the void that lies below. It is a risk I am more than willing to take in exchange for smoother grappling. As is tradition with these types of games, Lost Skies also features an extensive crafting system spanning a huge variety of materials and items you can make from them. And these materials are not just fluff either. Different metals, for example, have different effects on the quality of your equipment. Depending on what sort of materials you use, you can change everything from the item's durability to its power or weight. While there are generally quote-unquote correct options to go for in each piece, you don't have infinite resources, so a little bit of a compromise is always going to be necessary, which does help keep things interesting. Aside from that, the crafting system is fairly standard and should be instantly recognizable to veterans of the genre. There is, however, a pretty big oversight with all of this. You get heaps of different items thrust upon you, many of which take a lot of space in your inventory, yet there is no good system in order to store and sort them. You have to do everything manually via tiny chests that are very likely to be scattered all across your ship. Then, when you want to actually build something, you'll have to manually, again, find which piece of nearly identical metal is the one you need, grab it along with any other ingredients, and only then do the actual crafting. If that sounds super annoying to you, you would be correct. It is actually insane that Lost Skies doesn't either have a unified storage you can just dump everything into, or at the very least the ability to link chests with crafting stations so you don't have to frantically run around like a coffee-addled squirrel every time you want to craft anything. Fix that and the crafting will instantly become a lot more engaging, as you'll actually want to spend the time thinking about what items to build with which ingredients, rather than just picking the first thing you see so you can just kinda stop dumpster diving and get back to what actually matters: flying around and exploring. I spend a fair bit of time playing ancient CRPG games that kinda look like you took a bad photo of a casual D&D table and then smeared it in Vaseline. As such, I don't particularly care about graphics. But even I couldn't help to notice that Lost Skies' visuals are a bit of a mixed bag. Most of the stuff that is on top of the ground has a simple and sort of colorful look to it. And while the art style might be a little bit too clean for my liking, it is generally stylish enough that I wouldn't even think about complaining. Where the problem arises is with many of the bigger ground and wall textures, the stuff you see outside of the big set pieces. Now, I don't know much about visual design, but to me it looks like someone took a very tiny texture and then stretched stretched it out over a giant area, with the end result being an ugly, blurry mess that looks so bad compared to your highly detailed character that I just could not overlook it. If this was done in order to help with performance, I could understand, but Lost Sky's performance is also terrible. Approaching new islands, even if you're not going anywhere near them, makes the game seize up for a couple of seconds as all the new assets load. I eventually reduced my settings to medium in order to minimize this, but I could never get rid of it. I've also had frequent freezes in the middle of random actions, seemingly unaffected by what's actually happening around me. I could be picking flowers in the field and the game would just take a random 5-second break. Unsurprisingly, given the very fast-paced movement options and the combat that skews towards big bursts of damage, those stutters got me killed quite a few times. Then I would respawn, my body would glitch into my ship, the whole thing would explode, and I would be forced to Alt F4 in order to reload the last autosave from 15 minutes ago. I'd then spend 10 of those minutes flying back to where I was, and only then, finally, would I be allowed to actually continue with my adventures. That sort of nonsense would be somewhat fine if it happened once every dozen hours, but when it happens consistently, it just crushes the very concept of fun under its glitchy boots. Reviewing games like Lost Skies genuinely hurts my soul. It is not some terrible asset flip or a lazy cash grab, so I can just kinda make fun of it, we laugh, and then we go on. Quite the contrary, I love what it's doing, and I can see the heaps of potential behind it. I really want to recommend it, to have people experience the cool stuff that I have, but it is currently so unfinished and so broken that I cannot, in good conscience, do so. You'll just end up like me, constantly yo-yoing between having fun and being frustrated due to the endless sea of bugs and jank. And let me tell you, that is not the kind of stress you want in your life. However, despite its name, it's not actually a lost cause. With a couple of patches, and probably a couple of months as well, I can definitely see Lost Skies becoming the game it was always meant to be. I certainly hope it does, because even with all of the problems, I still managed to put in nearly 30 hours before I got worn down, and that is not something I do for any old game. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, hit the stupid bell, pet your manta ray, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you again for watching, and I do hope to see you soon. Bye bye!